Hello everyone, I am Sylvia and I plan to talk about state and private education and its role in social disparity. Despite boasting one of the strongest economies in the world, the United Kingdom continues to be rife with social inequalities that impact children daily. One of the most significant inequalities they face is unequal access to education and the subsequent opportunities that arise during and after childhood. I decided to begin my presentation with this quote because it pretty much sums up the topic that will be covered and highlights the social disparities in education. Let's start with a background on their educational system. The United Kingdom has one of the most particular education systems that still divide the country nowadays. However, it is divided in two types of education structures, being them the public schools and the state schools. The vast majority of students are educated in state schools from primary to secondary schools. State secondary schools mix students with a variety of abilities that come from very distinct social backgrounds. State schools are intended for people with less economic capacity. They are funded by the government and offer an education free of charge. Besides, some students may also be selected to attend grammar schools. In this system of education, the class size is bigger than in comparison to public schools, and the number of students per class is currently 22. But what are grammar schools? They are the only state schools that are allowed to select their students based on their academic ability. In fact, grammar schools are secondary schools that are also financed by the government. There are a few schools that have boarding facilities for which there is a fee charge, and until the 70s, students were required to attend the 11+ exam in order to determine which secondary school they would attend, a grammar school for the higher achievers or a secondary modern. The system ended up being replaced by a system of comprehensive schools that admitted students of all abilities. Moreover, these sorts of schools are still popular because of their indisputable academic success, and they are still available in certain counties. Currently, there are around 160 grammar schools in England and 69 in Northern Ireland. Comprehensive schools, on the other hand, offer a curricula of a grammar school, a technical school, and a secondary modern school without a division into separate compartments. Students are placed in A, B, or C streams according to their abilities, and the purpose of this type of schooling is to democratize education and to provide equal opportunities for all students. Now, moving to public schooling, it is separated from the state school system, and only 6% of students experience this method of education. These sorts of schools are perceived as the most exclusive and prestigious private schools in the country. This is a fee-paying system where its financing derives mostly from fees paid by the students' parents, but also from investments. These schools are very selective, and many contain boarding facilities for students who live in the premises. It was stated that fees to a public secondary school are on average £15,000 for a day student per year, while fees for a boarder student would rise up until £33,000 per year. In the system of education, a smaller class is preferred, from 8 to 15 students, in order to become more interactive and to provide a more personal learning experience. Nowadays, the entrance is competitive, usually by an examination, and it is supposed not to be restricted to social class, connections, or wealth. However, the ability to pay such fees is important, and some parents make great sacrifices in order to provide their children quality education. This happens for many parents who know that studying in a public school may give their children social advantages later in life. This sector is criticized for being elitist, social divisive, and based on the ability of paying for education, and because of this, it is still seen today as a class system education. Moreover, the type of school one attends is a proxy for socioeconomic background, but it is also an important part of someone's background, which can have a great impact on where they will end up later in life. Students from public schools tend to have access to high-quality teaching and facilities and much greater levels of resource than in state schools. There is a strong association between social class or family income and the reality of attending a private school. Students from independent schools are also more likely to go to university because they outperform academically their peers. It was confirmed through the Cipn Trust research that students coming from a private school system of education that apply to higher education in England are 7 times more likely to have a place at Oxford or Cambridge compared to those who attend non-selective state schools. Regarding universities, though the entrance to university should be based on merit and talent of a student, the reality is very different due to the inequality that marks the education system on former school levels. But how does it happen? The educational advantage at school is replicated in higher education students, with students from public schools significantly more likely to enter top universities rather than their state-educated colleagues. A university one attends influences their opportunities in the job market. Another example of inequality is that the students who graduate in higher-ranked universities are more likely to be invited to interviews and are offered a higher salary. Besides, attending university is seen as an opportunity of being successful in life, but attending the University of Oxford or Cambridge, it is not for less, since just 1% of the population attends such universities. Let's turn to the next issue, the school choice system. Regarding the educational system in the United Kingdom and all its differences, there is another element that should be taken into consideration, which is the parental choice of school that a student should or should not attend. It was acknowledged that parents value other aspects of schools besides the student's academic performance, and depending on the circumstances and on the parents, they may evaluate the trade-off between these aspects in different ways. Parents may not necessarily always choose the highest performance school for valid reasons. For instance, social class may have an impact in school preferences. For example, middle classes tend to value performance and peer group and tend to have access to quality information on schools. And on the other hand, disadvantaged families have access to less information and resources, which can limit the range of schools that they can consider due to transport costs, for instance. So now we can come to the next point, which is from elite education to an elite career. First of all, who are the elites? According to the Cambridge Dictionary, they are defined as the richest, most powerful, best educated, or best trained group in a society. Evidence from the 21st century university graduates shows that private school participants somehow continue to benefit from an economic premium in the labor market. This is the reason why private schools continue being associated with rich families, but why? The reason is that in Britain, elite education is largely located in autonomous fee-paying private schools, and they tend to choose schools based on class, but also based on family tradition. It was stated that in the UK there are about 8.4 million school students, of whom approximately 7% attend private schools. Besides, of the 1.4 million full-time undergraduates, only less than 2% attend Oxford or Cambridge universities. Let's move to the education and social mobility. Educational performance seems to be one of the main barriers which stop people from moving out of poverty. Besides, it is proven that disadvantaged children are still failing to achieve their educational potential. Furthermore, children who have less access to material resources have lower scores in terms of their cognitive ability. This suggests that there is a possible connection between poverty and social mobility, for the reason that children living in poverty achieve less at school, which cause them to have low levels of qualifications, and consequently it means that they will have fewer opportunities in labor market, which can typically lead to employment in lower paid semi-skilled or unskilled occupations. Moreover, it was proved that the aspirations, attitudes, and behavior of parents and children play an important role in explaining why disadvantaged children do worse at school. Researchers have pointed out that parental aspirations for higher education might impact the future decisions of their children. This is normally when mothers aspire for their children to go to university, they tend to have a more advantaged socioeconomic background and consequently children will do better at school and may possibly engage in higher education. Besides, it was stated that better educated parents are more worried about putting their children in better schools. Moving to the last topic, that is COVID and its effect on education. It has been more than a year since the pandemic of COVID-19 has been triggering complications, and the education sector has been one of the most affected. Britain's education system is no exception. The Cipn Trust has evidence that people that come from lower income backgrounds were the ones who have suffered more since the beginning of the pandemic. That happened because they had less support from home, lower levels of learning provision from school, along with problems accessing suitable technology in order to have a complete education. But the problems did not end up here, since the greater impacts of the pandemic are more localized in disadvantaged areas, as well as more severe economic consequences in households with fewer resources. Besides, all these problems have had and are still having an impact on students' educational progress, and it is vital that the recovery plan helps the disadvantaged groups to avoid a lost generation for social mobility. In fact, all this pandemic has proved is how external factors can impact the education system. It has exposed the vast differences between schools across the UK, for instance. While independent schools and many high-performing state schools with affluent intakes adjust more rapidly to school closures and got online, other schools localized in areas of deprivation face greater challenges than ever, including providing meals and other support children needed. In addition, another problem that the pandemic highlighted is the social segregation of the schools in the country. Furthermore, the pandemic has increased the burden on schools in order to support the students and their families that go beyond learning. However, this burden falls unevenly. Schools in areas of greater disadvantage have more students in need of support in comparison to others. In conclusion, the social division that exists in the United Kingdom educational system is very noticeable. The two methods of education end up dividing the nation because there is one intended for more affluent people and the other for people from lower income backgrounds. The public educational sector is associated with the feeling of belonging to an elite, for as they come from more wealthy families, they are also more likely to go to university and to have better opportunities in life. As for the state educational sector, the ones who attend this type of schooling tend to come from underprivileged families that cannot afford to pay tuition and they struggle more in life because of that. Another issue to point out is that social mobility is almost non-existent for those who did not attend private schools, for not having the opportunity to have access to a quality education. Finally, the COVID-19 pandemic just came to prove that there are several differences between schools across the UK and that people from lower income backgrounds are the ones who have suffered more with this pandemic because of the lack of resources. What can be concluded from this is that the rich will always become richer and the poor become poorer.